It is kind of like what Heroes of Might and Magic would be if it was a role-playing game. That is how I usually have described the older King's Bounty games, but the description doesn't really work anymore for King's Bounty 2. Now it's more like a budget Witcher game with Age of Wonder combat, or perhaps a Spiders RPG with fantasy general combat. Either way, a lot of older fans are upset, and there is a lot of negativity floating around. I don't think that King's Bounty 2 is as shitty as some make it out to be, but yes, it is a flawed game. Let me make it clear that I am not a super fan of the King's Bounty games. I have played many, but I have only completed one. They can be a nice time waster, but they also have a lot of filler and they can get awfully repetitive. As a busy, successful, modern man, I don't have time for that shit. I need to make money so that I can compete on the housing market. Anyway, King's Bounty 2 takes place in the fantasy kingdom Nostria, also known as generic medieval fantasy Europe. You get to choose between 3 different characters. We have Soldier Man, Sassy Wizard Woman, and Sean the fucking Ark, and as a man of taste, I chose the latter. The very first cutscene though, sadly, shows us what to expect.
Get up! Come on, hurry! The warden is calling! Are you really going to save Nostria, as they say?
Of course. But why do you ask?
You can discuss it with Warden Valber. Come out of that cell, I'll escort you.
What happened? Bastian, should I be worried?
Let's go. You know the warden doesn't like to be kept waiting. The sooner you get to his office, the sooner you'll learn everything. I can tell you this much. It's good news for you.
Sound issues and basic facial animations I can live with, but there is something weird about the dialogue. Some dialogue uncanny valley going on. Let us look at the same cutscene for the other characters and see if we can figure out what is going on.
Are you really going to save Nostria, as they say?
That's an interesting opener. What are you driving at?
You can discuss it with Warden Valber. Come out of that cell, I'll escort you.
Well, if the warden himself is asking, how can a simple countess refuse?
Let's go. You know the warden doesn't like to be kept waiting.
The dialogue doesn't flow, because it tries to have the same responses for 3 different characters, and it doesn't work. I understand that it is hard to juggle 3 different kinds of main characters at once, but I would really just prefer that they didn't even try if they don't have the resources to do it right. Whenever I see a game that allows the player to choose between different characters, I immediately think to myself that man, I bet this game's narrative is going to be shit. There will be no romances, all dialogue is going to be generic garbage, and the story won't be personal for the main character. There are exceptions, of course, mostly RPGs, but this is often the case, and it is true for this game as well. The game's narrative is crap. At best, it is average, and even that is a stretch. The main story is generic as it gets. There are a ton of different characters, but I can't think of a single one that gets enough screen time to actually develop into something worth a damn. Sadly, this is true for the main character as well. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I have no friends, no companions, no romantic interest, no character growth, nothing, nada, null, ingenting. It is not good, and considering how much time the game actually spends on its story, it is really a waste. With all of this out of the way, it should be said that the world building is okay.
Who taught you to drive, Loggy? Huh. Where are you going? I'm rolling along and you're rooted to the spot. Watch your tongue, pigsty.
It is not great, but it is okay. There is a ton of dialogue and you encounter all kinds of different people in your quests. You run into farmers, bandits, knights, mages, and so on. Even though it is all fairly generic, it still comes alive to some degree. And so, while the story and characters might be shit, the reality is that this game is almost entirely made up by you exploring the map, doing quests and fighting battles. And this, the story does okay. On paper, the game have two maps, one snow map and one forest map. But in practice, the game have one snow tutorial map and one big forest map for the main game. The environment variety leaves a lot to be desired, and I was pretty bored of the forest map halfway through the game. The forest map looks nice though. There is plenty of vegetation and other details that makes the forest come alive. It doesn't beat the forest of Kingdom Come Deliverance though, and on the topic of nice forest maps, I have good memories of rainy nights in Arcania. And in my sweet childhood memories, Oblivion still have some nice forests as well. In general, I wouldn't say that this is a bad looking game, and you can find examples where the game looks lovely. The opposite is also true though, and animations and facial expressions leaves a lot to be desired. Overall, it reminds me of Bard's Tale 4. Nice looking environments, but the characters and animations leaves a lot to be desired, and there is a certain feelings of yankiness present. Bard's Tale 4 though only cost $35 at launch, while this is being sold at almost full price. Make of that what you want. Anyway, in the RPG part of this game, you will do the usual RPG stuff. Explore the map, loot stuff, talk with people.
And by the way, when you tell this story to your grandchildren, remember, you were saved by Elisa of Lorien.
Equip and level up your character, and so on and so forth. Exploration is rewarded with items you can pick up, and different shrines giving stats bonuses. There are also a bunch of puzzles in the game, but it is mostly Simon Says puzzles for children.
It's some kind of riddle. If only there was some kind of hint.
And as a big-brained adventure gamer boy, this is way below my level, of course. With that said, I still always like puzzles in my games. While the map can appear open, it is mostly divided up by different choke points where you will need to defeat enemies or advance in the story to progress. So it is not an open world game. The corridor is very wide, but it is still a corridor. There are a bunch of towns containing quest givers and merchants, selling items, spells and units to your army. There is a decent number of items you can find, which is nice, although that annoying thing happened where I got really powerful items early on in the game and then ended up throwing away most of the newer items I got. This is just such a waste when so many items have been modeled. Who doesn't like playing dress up after all?
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. Life in plastic, it's fantastic.
Then we have the skill tree, which is decent. One thing I didn't like though is that the skill tree is capped by the choices you make in the story. If you want to have a higher level mage skill, for example, then you need to make a bunch of mage choices to get those sweet mage points. And trust me, you do want to unlock the skill Supreme Magic in this game. All in all, The RPG side of this game is what I would expect. It's fairly basic and it doesn't blow me away, but I don't think there is anything wrong with it either. Then we get to the combat, which I enjoyed quite a lot. The way it works is that when combat is started, you are teleported to a hex-based battle map, where you will fight turn-based battles using your army. You can have 5 units in total, and depending on your leadership stat, you can have different numbers of soldiers in each unit. So as the game progresses, you will increase the number of soldiers in each unit, and when you reach the maximum number of soldiers, then you often want to swap out that unit to a higher tier unit and so on. So your army will naturally change throughout the game by becoming larger and more powerful. The battle maps themselves are quite nice. The maps are now unique, match the environments, and contains elevation and choke points affecting the combat. This is a big improvement compared to the older games, where generic chessboard-like maps were reused constantly. It should be said that there are fewer battles in this game. The combat is spread out way more, and people who expect non-stop battles will be disappointed. I am happy with this change, and I much prefer fewer unique battles than a ton of samey battles. You can be a bit cynical and say that there are fewer battles due to the worse unit variety. There are fewer units, even if you compare it to King's Bounty Legends and not the later sequels. A quick count gives that King's Bounty 2 has around 50 units, while King's Bounty Legends have around 90. 50 is not a bad number by itself, but there are less factions and less variety. There are no demons, no elves, no vampires, but there are a lot of humans, dwarves and undead. I wouldn't go so far to say that the unit variety is terrible, but it is not great either, and it is especially felt in the second part of the game, but I will return to that later. Now the battles themselves are fairly typical, and you could be a bit mean and call them average. But units have a lot of active skills, and there are a large number of fun spells you can use. You can throw fireballs, buff your units, teleport them behind the enemy archers, and so on and so forth. And it all comes together really nicely in my opinion. There is certainly nonsense going on. Take Taunt for instance, which restricts your units to only attack the unit that use Taunt. It might not sound so bad, but for some reason Taunt works for units on the other side of the map, meaning that melee units are not able to attack the units right in front of them, since someone on the other side of the map said something mean. There are a bunch of annoying debuff abilities like this, and the UI can be poor in explaining what is going on, and on several occasions I thought that the game was bugged. Some of this shit reminds me of the feeling I would get in games like Baldur's Gate, when the enemies would endlessly spam mindfuck abilities, causing my whole party to run around like headless chickens, not attacking the enemy. I guess what I'm saying is that this kind of shit is not very fun. But all in all, I liked the combat, and I found the exploration part of this game to be okay. One thing that soured my experience was the painfully slow running speed, but they have patched this out, so I shouldn't whine too much about it. There is another thing though that soured my experience even more, which they will not be able to patch out, and that is the length of the game. The game took me around 40 hours to complete, and the game did not manage to keep my interest in it that long. The old games were massive, and I am not sure if they felt like this game needed to be long to satisfy the old fans. But to me, this game feels dragged out. This game does not have a narrative worth a damn, and so if you want to make the game long, then you need to deliver on the unit and environment variety. I felt that the older games were way too long as well, but in those games you had different islands with a huge number of different units. In this game you don't, and you spend 90% of the game in the same map, running around the same kind of forest and towns. It gets old fast. The units and spells certainly change throughout the game, but it is not enough. To me, this should be a 20-hour game. There is a theme here. For some reason, the game wanted to have 3 main characters instead of one good one. For some reason, the game wants to have a ton of side characters instead of focusing on a couple of strong ones. For some reason, the game wants to be 40-hour long instead of a shorter and more focused 20-hour experience. There are elements of this game that I liked, and I certainly have good memories from it. There is a competent game here, and if they would release King's Bounty 2, My Pirate Adventure, or whatever, then I would pay attention, since I would like to play more King's Bounty 2. I just want a shorter experience in a new environment with new units and a tighter narrative. And so, I leave King's Bounty 2 with mixed memories. I would give a light recommendation to people who like the genre, but the game is flawed. Still, you got to ask yourself how many games like this exist and how many years are you willing to wait for the next of its kind. Then again, I guess the new Disciples game is actually coming out this month.